Hi everybody, Doug Adams here to talk about all things running with you, and I'm going to go through an interesting little experiment I did here where I purposely injured myself. I'm going to tell you how and why after I first tell you don't try this at home. Make sure that you don't do the same experiment, but I'm always curious about when I'm reading literature and when I'm doing different studies, how does this apply to me? And can I really trust the numbers and the values that I'm seeing and that I'm working with? So when we've been doing a lot more with acute to chronic workload ratio and session RPE, I wanted to try it out for myself. So let's kind of give you the full story here. So we've been talking a lot about acute to chronic workload ratios and session RPE. If you haven't checked out those blogs, please check out the rundna.com/blog and check those out. But basically, it's looking and comparing your last 7 days to the previous average of the 4 weeks preceding that. And we see that if you're in this sweet spot, that you're normally safe from getting injured. So I wanted to try this out myself and see what would happen if I went outside of the sweet spot. So I had a race coming up and I said, okay, through May, I'm going to, in April, I really am going to ramp things up. So starting in April, I said, I'm going to start ramping my volume up and I'm going to purposely get to the point by the end of it where I'm over that, where I'll follow the ramp. I was running about 15 to 20 miles a week in March. And then I decided that I wanted to be in the 25 to 30 range by the end of the month. And I wanted to do it safely and effectively, but at the end I wanted to see what would happen if I went over it. So here's kind of the progression of where we went, and this is looking in the RunDNA app. You can see how went from early in the month pretty good, 103%, and then I started going up to 119, skating the edge a little bit, and then I passed the 130 and went to 147, and I got injured. So I want to talk you through this and why I learned that this tool, this acute to chronic workload ratio, is really so valuable for yourself for running, or if you're coaching or working with athletes, how it can be really helpful then too. So if you just looked at a training calendar, I pulled off of training site, Garmin Connect here, and just looked at my April training. So the first week in April was about 24 miles. Second week, 24, 0% change. Third week, I went to 25.2, so a 5% change, nothing really aggressive. 26.8 in the following week, so a 6% change. And then on May 2nd was the day I first started feeling pain, and that was only a 4% change from the week before. So that's kind of interesting. If you looked at this and you looked at nothing else, you'd be like, I'm not really sure why you got injured at this point, because it seems like you were doing an appropriate level of change. But that's really only one data point. We talked about looking at internal and external factors contributing to training load, and this is just the volume, but it doesn't really incorporate the intensity that I was doing this at. So now if we look at training volume a little bit differently here, we see this is how we do this in the RunDNA app. We also break it down by RPE, so rate of perceived exertion. And we look at it, and you see the week that I got injured, you could see that I spent about half my time running at low intensity, but I spent half my time between a 7 and 9 out of 10 intensity, which made my training load overall higher. So that means that I was overall higher than that 130% compared to the time before, because I hadn't been doing as much speed work. So even though my distance and my volume wasn't that much higher, I did go on to have pain where on that May 2nd, I went out for the run. I was like, my shin really bothers me today. And I tried to blind myself a little bit during this. And when I got home and saw when I loaded up my Garmin and it synced to my RunDNA app, that's when it put me at the 147%. And that's when I had my first little shin pain that I was experiencing. And I was lucky because you can see the week of May 3rd, I knew I was taking my son camping so I could take a little time off, and happy to say that it was a short-lived injury, just about a week or so of pain, but definitely something I would have liked to have avoided, and something that I am glad I went and learned about this, but I wouldn't want to do it again. So I think it's really valuable to see how we can use these acute to chronic workload ratios to to progress and understand how we have to capture more than just volume to understand why somebody might be getting injured. So lessons learned: 1, don't injure yourself, not fun at all. But 2, when you do get above that 130 for the acute to chronic workload ratio, I had immediate pain. Now, this is an N of 1, so take this for what it is, but I've been using this with a lot of my athletes, and I'm seeing very similar results where they start to get aches or pains once they get too high in that ratio. And the nice thing about this is that the RPE, when you rate yourself of how hard the run was, it really incorporates and picks up on the training load better than just looking at the volume or intensity alone. So hopefully this is helpful for you, and you don't need to go through the same thing that I did and experience pain. I definitely wouldn't recommend it. But it's important to see that by looking at that, it's really helpful to get a bigger understanding of how your training load really is and how you might be letting yourself or your athletes get into trouble with it. So if you are using the RunDNA app, this does require a Garmin connection, so it's easy. Just go to integrations and you'll be able to log into your Garmin Connect. Pretty quick and easy to do. So we hope that you're finding utility in this, and would love to hear some examples of how you've used this to help your athletes get ready as they're ramping up for training programs or trying to avoid injury.